And then one day my partner, we're at a loss, and he goes, okay, forget this. Let's come up with the worst idea for a pilot. Just spend 10 minutes coming up with the worst idea. And I go, oh, well, I can do that. I can do that in my sleep. And so I remember I walked off to the bathroom and I came back and I go, okay, I got it. Here's the worst idea you've ever heard. This is a multi-camera sitcom, and it's about a guy, his future self, and his past self, and they're all roommates, and they don't get along. and Siebert, my partner, his eyes lit up. He goes, wait a minute.
You're listening to Screenwriters Need to Hear This with Michael Jamin.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Screenwriters Need to Hear This, the podcast. I'm here with Phil Hudson. What's up, Phil?
How's it going?
It's going good. Today we're going to talk about, hopefully this will be helpful, where do ideas come from? That's the name of the episode. And I don't know. So I'm going to tell you how I come up with them. And maybe it'll help, maybe it won't. Because some people have absolutely no idea where we get these stories from. Like, some people will reach out to me, or they'll leave a comment and they'll say, so do the executives on the show, do the network executives give you the ideas? And it's just like, it's so funny how far off the mark that they are. Like, no, they have no idea. They don't know how to do it. That's a writing job. They would have no freaking idea. They would have zero idea. But I also, to be fair, I have no idea how to do their jobs. So why would they know how to do my job? Like, how would they know how to give me an idea? They wouldn't know. It's not their job. And it's so funny because I remember when I first broke in, even before, my partner and I got into the Warner Brothers writing program, where they kind of like mentor you, and it's like a 10-week program or something, and you're meeting other writers, and then you have to put together a script, and then you're giving your script to the executives, and you're trying to get notes from them. And all along, like, we're young writers, so we barely know how to write. We were struggling. And I remember turning in our script to executives and saying, knowing it wasn't great, and we're like, okay, so what do we do now? How do we fix this? Because you're the boss, and the executives, whatever, some 35-year-old, how do we fix this? And they would talk as if they knew, but they had no idea. They were all over the map. They really didn't know, because it's not their job. And so why would they know? And that's not, again, it's not a knock on them. It's just not, if they knew how to do it, they would be writers. They, instead they have executives, and they have other job responsibilities that I have no idea what they're doing or how they do it. So it's not a knock. It's just like, that's not what they do. And so, I actually remember I wrote with a friend who was, I didn't know him. So I was on a show, and we hired these writing team, and one of the writers, he used to be an executive, and he told me, yeah, we executives, we don't know how to do it. If we think we want to know how to do it, we all wish we could do it, but very few of us can. But they all or this is what he said. Many of them were aspiring writers who just didn't know how to, who wanted to do it, but for one reason or another, didn't pursue it or doubted themselves or whatever. But some did break into writing. I can think of 3 former executives that did break into writing and became, very successful and good. And so the ideas don't come from them. It doesn't come from the network. That's another thing why I always laugh when people say, does Hollywood have an agenda? You Hollywood writers have an agenda, as if all the ideas come from corporate, but they don't come from corporate. They come from us. So, it doesn't work that way.
And we had that podcast episode that talks about this. It talks about, we're talking about things that are relevant right now because that is what's top of mind, and that will change in 10 years when something else is top of mind.
Yeah.
As society shifts and changes.
Right. We did a whole talk on that, so we won't go over that too much. But the point is, they don't get it. And so even now, even today, when I'm working on a project, I'll get a note from an executive, they're usually young, and they'll give a note about what they think the show should be, what the story should be. And I'm always like, I can't tell how many times I'm thinking, that's not a story. That's not a note. That's not something I can execute. That's not something I would even know how to begin writing, because that's not a story. That's not an idea. That's just you grasping for straws. That happens sometimes. Hopefully not a lot, because it's kind of frustrating, because you don't want to embarrass them. You don't want to be rude. You don't want to tell them they don't know how to do it. You have to kind of couch it in a way that, and by the way, it doesn't always happen. There are executives who do know what they're doing. It's just that sometimes, depending on where you're doing a project, sometimes they don't. So, and you don't know how they got that job. They could be someone's friend. We don't know, right? So you have to be polite and you have to kind of navigate that world. And that can be really hard, especially, it can be hard for me. With my experience, it can be really hard for someone who's just breaking in, because the temptation is to think, well, I don't know how to do it. They must know how to do it because they have an office and a chair, and a desk. They must know, and I know I don't. And so, that's why studying is so important, so that you can have some kind of confidence and not feel like, I'll do whatever you tell me to do, because that's could be a disaster. So one thing I say a lot, so where do ideas come from? If it doesn't come from the corporation, the idea machine. And I think what I often hear is people are racking their brains for a great idea. And I say this a lot, you don't need a great idea, you need a good idea, and you need to execute it great. There's a difference. And so I even remember often, these are just ways that my partner and I use sometimes to generate ideas. Sometimes ideas are just two disparate ideas mashed together. That's it. And so if you can think of, take the wheel from Wheel of Fortune, that giant wheel that has all the pies. Think of that. Think if you have two giant wheels, and so one says, different ideas like crime, thriller, another slatter, comedy, romantic comedy, and then the other ideas. The other wheel might say, various movies that you've watched. Whatever, Rambo, or Walking Dead, some kind of zombie movie, whatever, some Tom Cruise movie. And you spin these wheels, and then they eventually, two items line up, and you go, okay.
Clack. And then it stops. Yeah.
And then you just say, okay, let's marry these two ideas. How can we marry it? And we see this a lot. I mean, that's why it's very cliche, but when it's very cliche, but the cliche in Hollywood often is, this is something meets something. This is Die Hard meets Steel Magnolias. This movie, that's your pitch. That's how people pitch. It's Die Hard meets Steel Magnolias. And you're like, I don't really know what that means, but I guess it's a bunch of Southern women,
trapped in a terrorist attack.
Right.
And so,
but maybe that's your movie. I mean, okay, that's an idea. Think about it, and what's specific to these Southern women, sensitive Southern women in a terrorist attack movie. That could be something interesting. And so just literally make your wheel of stupid ideas and see how they match up, and see, maybe you'll get a good one. I remember, everyone's trying to come up with a great idea. I remember my partner and I, we had an overall deal at CBS Productions. This is many years back. And so when you have an overall deal, you're basically, it's a sweet gig. You're sitting in a room and you're just trying to come up with ideas to sell shows, pilots. And it's really it's so cushy, but you have to come up with ideas, but you get paid well. And so we were racking our brains trying to come up with the best idea for a pilot, because that's what they're paying us to do. And then one day my partner, we're at a loss, and he goes, okay, forget this. Let's come up with the worst idea for a pilot. Just spend 10 minutes coming up with the worst idea. And I go, oh, well, I can do that. I can do that in my sleep. And so I remember I walked off to the bathroom and I came back and I go, okay, I got it. Here's the worst idea you've ever heard. This is a multi-camera sitcom, and it's about a guy, his future self, and his past self, and they're all roommates, and they don't get along. and Siebert, my partner, his eyes lit up. He goes, wait a minute. He goes, wait a minute. Get rid of the past self. Don't make it a multi-camera, make it a single camera. And now we got something. I'm like, we do? And it does. We sold a pilot on that premise called Future Bob, and it was about a guy, and it was a really good pilot, but it was too high concept, so it didn't get done. But we wrote it, and it was we had a lot of fun writing it. And it was called Future Bob, and it was about a guy who was he was on the cusp he was about to his life was about to come together. He was about to get a job as a photographer, for a Maxim magazine kind of guy, job where it seems like that's a dream job for like a 26-year-old, man, taking pictures for hot, women for Maxim. And so this is his job. He just got this incredible job. His life is about to change. And then he's chased down by some drunken, derelict 60-year-old man chases him down an alley and puts a knife to his throat and says, "You can't take that job." Well, why not? Because I'm you from the future, and that job is going to ruin your life. And this guy's a drunk, and he's just an awful person, and that became the premise for a really funny script, because the future Bob had all this. Future Bob was living the life. He was drunk. He was having sex with hookers. He was doing cocaine. He was living the life, but he's telling his past self, "No, you can't do any of that stuff. Don't do what I do. Do as I say, not as I do." He was like
Right.
the most annoying person to have, be your roommate or your future self, because you don't want to turn into him, because he's a dirtbag, and you see what a loser he is, and he has to move in to be roommates because he has no money, because he's blown all his money gambling and all this other stuff, so they become roommates, and he has to care. Present Bob has to care for future Bob, and it's just like this buddy comedy by these two guys who they kind of hate each other, but they also obviously they laugh at the same jokes. They both think they're incredibly witty. They laugh at their same stupid fart jokes. Because oh my God, no one gets me like you do, But that was like an interesting. That's an interesting. Like how we got to that. It was just like, here's a bad idea. How can we make a bad idea good?
Yeah.
And so that's one way to do it. Another way I always encourage people to come up with ideas is to think, if you're on an existing show, think of their characters' weaknesses, not strengths. Think of their weaknesses and explore that. I remember, Phil, did I tell the story from Lois and Clark? Did I ever tell that one?
I think it's worth talking about again, because it's been a minute, but anyone who's interested in the subject, I think what you're really getting at here too is idea versus execution. Episode 10 of our podcast, we talk about a lot of the stuff in depth. There's some really good examples of what you're talking about here, about how an idea could be completely good or completely horrible depending on the execution of that idea. But you do talk about that a little bit there. And I think it's worth bringing up again, though, because it's been, 20-something episodes at this point.
Okay. If you haven't heard that, I apologize if you heard it. I'll make it brief. If you want to hear the whole thing, you'll go back and listen to that episode. But so real briefly, when my partner and I were, we sold, my first job was selling a freelance episode of Lois and Clark: The New Adventures of Superman. And I remember it was like a lot of pressure, because we got this pitch and we wanted to sell something, and we were struggling to come up with ideas. And my partner said, "This damn Superman, he's such a goody two-shoe. It's so hard to come up with ideas because he's such a goody two-shoe." And I think I had never thought of Superman as being a goody two-shoe, and he is. He's a do-gooder, and he's like perfect, and he's golly. He's a god. He's that kind of guy. He's golly. And so the idea we came up with was, what if Superman was slapped with a paternity suit? That would, someone saying, "This is your baby," that would hurt his feelings, because I would never have premarital sex. Like he's that guy. And that would hurt his, and so that became the episode that we sold, and it became, highly rated episode of Lois and Clark because of that, because of, oh gosh, it hurt my, someone's dragging my name through the mud. And so that's an example of writing from someone's weaknesses, even if they don't seem to have any, because, he's Superman, what are his weaknesses? Another way I used to get ideas, it's less so now because there are no magazines anymore, but I would often, this was taken from a creative writing assignment I had when I was a kid, and the teacher said, go open up a magazine and find an ad, and then write a story about what's going on in that ad, and if it's just like a couple walking on the beach or whatever, write a story about that. And so just flipping through pages of a magazine can help you, or just reading it, you go, oh, look what's going on here. Here's an article about people getting addicted to their cell phones or whatever. Maybe there's a story there, But if you expect to get an idea, if you expect to pull one out of thin air, that's really hard. So it's much easier if you just draw inspiration, steal, whatever you want to call it. But be in the world and keep your eyes open for other resources.
Yeah. On that note, there's a writing exercise that we've done in some of the Sundance stuff. When I was a Redford scholar, we would have Joan from the Sundance Institute. She'd come in and do some of these workshops she does in the others, and she'd have us write just a bullet point biography in like 5 minutes, and it would start with, who owns this? Look at this picture of this truck. Who owns this truck? Mm-hmm. And then you would project your own life experience of the person who owns that truck into a biography, and then you would, just as an exercise, write these monologues and weaving your own stories in throughout this person's perspective who owns that truck. So a very similar process there in terms of coming up with ideas.
Yeah, and don't be so terrorized with like the blank page, or terrified. Just like, you start writing. You're not gonna.
And it doesn't have to be perfect either. It's
Yeah,
not going to be. Just
right.
own that. It will not
Own
be
it.
perfect. It's impossible for it to be perfect out of the gate. Just put it down.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. There's plenty of time to judge yourself later. Don't judge yourself now. Just start writing it.
Yeah,
Don't
exactly.
hold back. Another way I often do this is I think about like what's a good thing that could go wrong. What's a good, if you have two characters, and this is easy actually. It's like if you have two characters that are friends, hey, what's a good thing? Hey, let's buy a boat together. Hey, sure, we're friends. We'll go fishing. We buy a boat together. Well, what could go wrong? Well, boats are expensive. They can start fighting over it. So that's kind of an easy way to attack that problem. What's a good thing and how can I make it go bad?
Hey, it's Michael Jamin. If you like my videos and you want me to email them to you for free, join my watch list. Every Friday, I send out my top 3 videos. These are for writers, actors, creative types. You can unsubscribe whenever you want. I'm not going to spam you, and it's absolutely free. Just go to michaeljamin.com/watchlist.
I think one of the things that's very real for me, I've had a whole breadth of new experiences as a person, being married, having my first kid, and a lot of the things that are present and I'm writing down as ideas are interactions I'm having with my wife or with my child of like,
Yeah.
who ever thought I would be here having this conversation? Why am I talking about this thing and why am I so heated about it? Right.
Yeah.
And it something wouldn't have mattered to me before, or beautiful moments of watching my daughter like play in the water for the first time outside in the sun and falling down in the cold water and her reaction and what that feels like and what that experience is.
Yeah.
Going to the hospital the first time with my daughter because we found out that she was diagnosed with failure to thrive. You ever heard of that?
No. What does that mean?
Basically, she just wasn't eating enough. She was struggling to put
Oh.
on weight. She was losing weight, and we went to the hospital. Spent 2 days there just trying to figure out what was going on. Turns out she just wasn't eating enough, right? And
So now you
we
just
fixed
got
that. She's totally fine. This was like last
Right.
fall, right?
Okay.
But there's all these experiences I never thought I'd have to go through, and it's a whole new world of emotions hitting me,
Mm-hmm.
and new experiences that you can't even fathom when you're just a single guy or a girl just
Right.
living your life. It's just
Mm-hmm. Caring for
never
somebody
thought
else.
the fear of what if they come in and tell me something's terribly wrong with my child.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Or then hearing that everything's fine and then the desire to get out of that building as fast as possible.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
because what if something changes, almost you're like trying to run
Yeah.
away from a diagnosis that could come in.
Yeah.
Some weird stuff that comes up there, right? And that's real meaty stuff. And by the way, if you hear the way Michael's saying, yeah, it's because Michael's a father. And I imagine, Michael, you have felt these things.
Uh-huh. Sure. That the minute you become a parent, it's like you become a drone bee. Protect the queen. Protect the queen. I mean, it's like you become. It was all about me before the kid, and then you have a kid, and it's all about the kid, and you become a lunatic. You become a lunatic and a slave to this little thing. So, protect the queen. Yeah.
Well, I have some other thoughts here on like ways to come up with ideas. I don't want to jump in if you have anything.
Please go ahead.
I've talked about it on the podcast. Like I've paid for basically any course online you can about screenwriting. Redford Scholar, translated for the labs. Have a bachelor's degree in film story development, and I've been through a lot of this, and I've heard a lot of people come up with different ways to come up with ideas, and there's some that work for me and some haven't. So I'm just going to talk about some of them. One of them that really stood out to me really early on was keeping a dream journal. Have you ever done that?
No, but I don't like that idea. But go ahead. Tell me why you like it.
I don't like that idea either, but this one stood out to me, and so I tried it. So you wake up from your dream, and you're like, holy cow, that was a crazy dream. I wonder if that's going to be a great idea for a screenplay. And then I rush to type it into my phone, and as I'm typing, it's fading, and I lose it, and I don't have it, and it's gone.
Right.
And going back, looking at that later to try to write it out, it ends up just kind of being like a poof of an idea. And I just say poof is because it feels so ethereal and not tangible. You can't really grasp it. But I know people who say that works really well for them. Why do you not like that idea?
Well, for the same reasons you're talking about, but I also feel like dreams are so like they're so irrational. Like there's some weird things that, I mean, if you get to the bottom of it, oh, I see what's going on here. I have anxiety or whatever, but like it's so disjointed. None of it makes any sense in your dream. Even when you talk about it. Well, I don't even like when people tell me their dreams because I feel like, shut up. It's like, it doesn't make sense, you know? Like, give me something. It doesn't make sense. Oh, and then a leprechaun walked in, right? Which is, it's supposed to be weird. I don't like watching dream sequences on TV shows, you know? Because it's like, I guess they're supposed to be arty or something, but that's like the one thing I didn't like in The Sopranos was that whole dream thing. I was like, can we go back to reality now? You know?
Right. Right. I guess it is about psychology, so I guess that makes sense. We're talking about the inner psyche of like a mob boss. He's seeing a therapist. Yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, so this one was one of the first things that really stood out to me, and I've tried it, and I'll write things down, and I think that it relates to another lesson that I learned, which is, as you know, everyone has a good idea for a screenplay. Oh, I've got a great idea for a screenplay. I just need someone to write it. Or, I've got this great idea for a screenplay. I just need to find time to write it. Like, everyone's got an idea. Everyone's got an excuse. No one wants to sit down and do the writing. And when they tell you their idea, and the other one I hear all the time is like, oh, you should write a TV show about my life. My life is just the craziest. Well, tell me why. And then they get into it. It's like, that just sounds like a very mundane life. And very pocked with very interesting, crazy things. Nothing of real value there. Not saying people's lives aren't of value, by the way. Just saying that's the case. But one of the things that I first learned was the idea of finding out what fascinates you about that idea. So the first thing you have this idea, oh, there's a great idea for a screenplay. And the mistake most novices make is they run off and they write that idea. But as we know from story structure, that probably isn't a good story, right? But there might be something fascinating about that concept that you could make a story out of, right? And so you really dial it down and say, what fascinates me about this thought or this idea that I have? Then you ask yourself the question, what are 10 or 12 interesting ways I could tell a story about that fascinating thing, right? Now, what it does for me, and this one I think works really well, is it allows you to stretch and get out of the cliche, and you start really looking at the interesting uniqueness, and things come. You can change it to, what are 10 different settings I could put that in? What would this be like if it was this genre, kind of going back to your Wheel of Fortune wheel, right? You're mirroring those things up. But getting out of the initial idea for me and really thinking about what fascinates me, that has been very helpful, right?
Yeah, but then you got to pick one. You got to pick a road, though. I mean, if you have 10 ways to do it, eventually you got to just choose one.
You pick the one, and that stands out the most to you, that feels the least cliche, and then you start breaking that story.
Yeah. What other ideas? No, I mean that sounds right to me. I get that.
Okay. You brought it up. It's similar to what you talked about. With like the newspapers, or not newspapers, but magazines and things like news. What are things that are prevalent in the news right now that people are talking about? I mean, you can hear some crazy stuff. I don't know if you've ever done that experiment where you just Google a date and then Florida. Have you ever done that?
No. Because always some stupid
crazy stuff. So let's just do this right now. Give me a date, a random date.
All right. So, okay, we'll do May 4th, 1989.
Okay. Let's find out. Florida man hit dad in face with pizza after learning he helped deliver him.
There's always something going on in Florida. I don't know what's going on.
It's crazy. There. Like the Florida thing's crazy. So I'm not saying advocating you write a story about that, but why would it be so upsetting you to find out that your dad helped deliver you that you would attack your father?
Was the dad also delivering a pizza? Maybe the word delivery is his trigger.
Right? Maybe that's what it is. So there's just craziness. So you're just scouring the news and finding like, okay, why is this thing happening?
Yeah,
what is
and then
this crazy story?
That movie's called Delivery Man, and then we write it about a father who's impregnated about a bunch of people, and he was delivering pizzas. Sounds like porn.
There you go.
Yeah,
maybe it's what happens after the porno, right?
Yeah, there you go. He's a he's a pornographer. But there you go. I mean, it looks like now you found an idea, and it was just because you found it on Google.
Yeah,
but you gotta look.
What's in the news? What's in the zeitgeist? Like a couple of years ago, there were people taking bath salts and like eating each other. Like almost like a zombie type apocalypse because of designer drugs, right, that people are taking. So what would push you to take, and bath salts is like just a street name for a synthetic drug.
It's not really a bath salt.
It's not actually bath salts, but it looks like bath salts. And you
because what if you got a granny and she's got arthritis and she wants to get some bath salts to help her arthritis, and then her grandson gives her designer drugs, and now she becomes a zombie. She starts eating people. I'll watch that.
There's another story idea, right?
I'll watch that movie. Who wants to give me a couple $100,000 to write it?
maybe there should be a new segment of the podcast where we just like pitch ideas and just come up with just ridiculous things.
Yeah.
Right? Interesting jobs is another one, right? Like I have a friend who is a private investigator.
We could call it bath assault. Bath assaults, Phil.
Bath assaults.
Bath assaults.
Michael, I've witnessed in the room, by the way, that Michael is the pro at coming up with titles and names for things.
Shitty names. Yeah. But then when I come up with a name, I go, stop. Everyone stop. Here's the title of the episode. All right, let's go back to work now.
Yep. We all appreciate it.
Like that's the most important thing anyone could add is the title.
Yeah. All right, people spend time on titles. Jobs. I was saying jobs. I have a friend who's a private investigator, and him just telling me stories about what he's experienced as a private investigator, fascinating.
Yeah.
Some of those, and they're real, and some of them are incredibly sad. Some of them are just ridiculous. Some of them are fascinating. And so, what is it? The job of a private investigator, or is it the thing they were investigating and the story behind that? And he's just a bit player in that story.
Well, I mean, think of how many shows are about PIs. I mean, the Magnum PI, plenty of private investigator shows. Sure. Yeah. Put a little fresh spin on that.
Yeah. So who do you know with an interesting job? And you can interview and get that expert resource from. Those are some things that have really stood out to me. For me, the episode of the pilot episode that we read together and you gave me notes on, it's about something that I don't have a ton of experience with. Like I'm not a special operator in the special forces, right? I'm not in Delta Force. I'm lucky enough to know some people who operate in that space. But for me, it's really the story of human trafficking, which is something that is deeply concerning to me. Right. Mm-hmm. And so what's an interesting way to highlight this problem in society that we have and how it actually affects more people than you think it does? Well, to me, that was an interesting way to talk about it. Not saying it's a great script or,
Well, no, but that's what I liked about that. It's like, well, what if the protagonist was himself? We talked, one of the ideas that we threw out was, what if he was someone who was trafficked, so it's like, so it's like a cycle, you're doing this horrible thing, but you had it done to you. So why not, that's what, and that's what abuse is. A lot of abuse comes from that. And, you're abused as well. So, you got to pass it on. So yeah, I mean, that's interesting. There was a book, by the way, I don't have it anymore, but I used to have a book. It was about weird jobs. It was almost like a coffee table book. And each chapter was like a strange job. I can't remember. I wish I don't remember. Odd job. I don't remember what it was called, but it was really interesting. People had just strange jobs, like people who would like refill vending machines. Okay, I didn't like that's an interesting job. Let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, like Pineapple Express, right? He's a process server, so he's a stoner who just serves people in lawsuits, right?
Right.
And he happens to get involved in this thing, but the fact that job just kind of speaks to who he is. It's just anybody can do that job. You literally just have to be 18 years old to be able to serve someone papers. Right? It speaks to the character, but it also allows him to be in these interesting ways, and he evades people, and it highlights some of that stuff. So, I'm not saying that any of these are great ways to come up with ideas, but for me, they've been great ways to really stretch myself outside of cliche. And I think that's kind of the core here, right? There's tropes and there's cliche, and when you say execute a great idea, I'm making this word up, greatly. I don't know if I'm doing that.
Yeah,
excellently. I don't know.
Yeah, goodly.
Leave a comment and tell me how poor my English is. That's fine. That dude's got a degree in English. I don't. It's in story development. Anyway, but it's great ideas done very well, and that's what people were interested in.
Yeah, right. So they're everywhere. So, but don't get hung up on, I need a great idea. You need a good idea. That's all, Yeah.
Cool. That's what I got. You got anything else on your end, Michael?
That's it. I thought we would chat about that, and we did, Phil. Tell them what's coming up.
Well, I was going to say real fast, I have one small note here too. When you talk about with these executives and how executives, a lot of them want to be writers. It's kind of in my experience in Hollywood that a lot of people are kind of stuck in jobs they don't want, and they all want to be a writer, director, producer type person.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's some bitterness that comes with that. And you talk about how when you get these bad notes, you have to be polite and you can't embarrass them.
Yeah.
One recommendation I have, it's a classic book. Highly recommend it to people. It's How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie.
I read that.
I think
sure.
I think it's a must read for most people.
Yeah.
It's just how you talk to people will resolve most problems and allow you to get out of those sticky situations. So if you want to be a writer and you're going to have to deal with people and convince people or influence people to see things your way or get out of something you don't want to do tactfully, that's a very powerful tool.
Yeah. Good stuff, Phil. What do we want to talk about? We should promote? Tell people about our watch list. What should we do?
Yeah, watch list is important. I think michaeljamin.com/watch list. Just get Michael's best videos delivered to your inbox every week. Had a lot of people comment that they really like that. Seems like it's been very helpful. 3 things: writer, actor, creatives. I think those are really the 3.
And it's free. It's just like, there's no reason not to sign up. You just sign up, and once a week Phil sends out like an email. Hey, here are 3 videos that will help you, and each one's about 2 or 3 minutes long. Like if you don't have time to watch 2 or 3 minutes, once a week, you gotta check your commitment level. They're meant to help you. So just watch it and then give it some thought on your drive to work or whatever you're going. It'll help.
Yeah.
You know,
meditation, something to think about.
Yeah.
Other than that, follow Michael on social media at Michael Jamin Writer. If you're looking for a little bit more of the advanced daily inspiration, I think that's a great place to get it because you're always talking about things and you do a lot of lives too. So if anyone wants to hop in and ask some questions, following Michael on like Instagram, TikTok, those are great places because you hop in and you will literally just answer questions for 30 minutes or so. A couple times.
I'll probably do a live after this. Yeah. If I have some time. Yeah, I'll probably do that. So come follow me on Instagram. That's where I'm at. That's where the good looking kids hang out.
Yeah. Last thing I'd bring up, we kind of revived these free lessons that you had. We had kind of lumped into one, and we've split it back up into these 3 more, I think, specific lessons that a lot of people who bought your course early on said really helped them. So that's live again. You can go get those at michaeljamin.com/free, and you just sign up. They're delivered to you. You get 1 a day for 3 days. And to me, I think it's some of the most valuable stuff that you teach about what a story is.
Yeah, that'll help. And I guess one final thing. So as you know, I'm starting to tour with my with a paper orchestra, my collection of personal essays. So I'm not sure when this podcast is going to drop, but if you want to be on the email list for when I'm get to your town, if I come to your city, go to michaeljamin.com/live, and I'll tell you I'll tell you get a schedule of where I am. So if you want to come see me.
Good stuff.
All right, everyone. That's it. Thank you. Until next time.
This has been an episode of Screenwriters Need to Hear This with Michael Jamin and Phil Hudson. If you'd like to support this podcast, please consider subscribing, leaving a review, and sharing this podcast with someone who needs to hear today's subject. For free daily screenwriting tips, follow Michael on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Michael Jamin Writer. You can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Phil A. Hudson. This episode was produced by Phil Hudson and edited by Dallas Crane. Until next time, keep writing.